We have Garrett from Aceable, an Austin-based startup here with us today. Let's give him a warm startup round welcome.
Thank you all.
All right.
Thanks, Aceable team.
So thanks, Blake, for being here with us. We want to get to know you a little bit more. Let's talk about your background, your family, and where you grew up.
All right. Thank you all for coming. I mean, I think half I know pretty much, and the other half, hey, this will be nice and intimate, I guess, right? My background, I grew up in Northern California, Silicon Valley. My dad was in startups. In high school, all my jobs were in startups in some fashion, whether it was on, the most interesting stories were all on assembly lines. Me and a bunch of Vietnamese or Filipino guys that were my education as a 15-year-old. So that's where I started seeing it, and I knew it was something I always wanted to do. After college, I kind of took an easy way out and went into accounting/consulting because they offered me a job junior year of college, and that meant I didn't have to do anything senior year, so I just took it. After doing that for 6 years, I decided it was time to go back to the dream of starting a company. So when I was 28, 4 years ago, I did. And here we are.
So Aceable was that company?
The company was technically, and people that, so I work with all you, so you might not even know some of this, or you might. The company was actually called 60 Seconds, and there's no vowels in it, which was my first lesson that I learned when starting a company. Because being on the phone and giving someone your email address when there's no vowels in an email address is really, 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 really hard. People called it 60 seconds. It was a really, really bad choice, but hey, it was the first of many really, really bad choices. So what was the rest of that question?
So, okay, what did 60 Seconds do?
I'll quickly go through the list. It started out as a mobile charades game. Then it turned into for a brief minute, about 3 weeks, it became a video sharing platform, which I don't know if y'all even know. And then it became a trivia game for the news. Then it became a trivia game for nonfiction books, starting with books for men on pregnancy and being fathers. Then we launched an app, because I had this big trivia platform idea, for I can't even sugarcoat this, a women's shoe trivia game. Designer high-end shoes. They were too high-end. I think that was my first lesson learned. Well, that was not my first. Then we made a trivia game for men's health. And then an investor told me I should stop doing all of those ideas and start over. So we started over, and that's when Aceable came about.
So what was the ramp up like in that company? Was it just you? Did you build a team?
It was just me. There was peaks and valleys where it changed. So I started it with 2 friends. After about a month, they decided that happy hours on Fridays and being hungover on Saturday was more important. So then it was just me. And then for a couple months, it was just me while I tried to figure out some way to get this mobile trivia game built, mobile charades game built. Was gonna outsource it, and then I was introduced to this guy who was technical. And when you're not, I can't write code to save my life. I tried to learn, and it didn't go very well. You meet someone that can write code, as an engineer, and they want to help you. Like, that's the most important moment. Like, you feel amazing. He was just not a very good person. So met someone that wanted to help. It lasted about a month and a half. I learned all sorts of things about IP law, which we can go into if you want. But it was a really miserable month and a half. After that, tried to find a co-founder. It's really hard and awkward to try to find a co-founder. It's like talking to women at a bar, but weirder because it's guys at a bar, and it's usually not at a bar. It's at tech events, and they get approached by people with ideas pretty much all the time. So that didn't go very well. And then eventually I decided that I would use a dev shop to try to get an MVP of the product, which by that time had changed to trivia games for dads.
Did you ever try the co-founder meetup?
I did. I pitched at it. Yeah, I distinctly remember I pitched at it when it was a news trivia game and did not get much luck.
Interesting.
So yeah, then after that I never had a co-founder. But thankfully I hired Josh Hostetler, and that made all the difference.
Don't put me in that sentence.
So what was your thought process in your early career, and how's that developed?
How early of career?
It could be with Aceable, it could be right after college, whatever.
I'll
it
spare
resonates
everyone
to.
right after college. Over the last 3 years, what's the best way? I think I just understand now the fundamentals of what makes a good business a lot better than I did. I was way more into like the hype of a big idea, and less into like, is there an actual market? Is there a pain point? Is there a unique way to acquire customers? Is there defensibility? And all of the actual pieces that you learn painfully that are required. Before it was like, oh, I'll make a mobile charades app and Zynga will buy it for $200 million. Like, that's a no-brainer. That was literally what I thought. And the hard part is that works for like one person out of a million or 50 million or bigger. And you read about it in TechCrunch and then you think that's the way to do it. But you painfully find out that's not how it works.
Sure. So who were your first customers? Let's talk about Aceable. Who were your first customers and how did you get them?
So, well, so Aceable, what we do, I don't know. Does anyone not know what we do? Because the people I talked to before kind of knew. All right, you 1.5 people. Well, 2 people, 1.5 knowledgeable people. We are mobile education focused. We do driver's ed in an app online, make it funny, engaging, convenient, and I can go into all the value props later. But we're a direct-to-consumer business. So our first customers, were people buying our course for $100, which is a hell of a lot more money than I made selling trivia games for dads. By a lot. So I remember working in so Josh, who's over here, is the only person that worked with me when we sold that first course. We would run a lot of mobile app installs on Facebook. So that was our kind of unique way to attract customers because none of our competitors had a mobile app. So we ran Facebook ads, and I still remember, I think it was a Friday night, the first person that really bought that we didn't know, because you try to get all your friends with kids to buy and whatnot. So then, early on, we wrote handwritten thank you notes to them. We did all of the things that our competitors wouldn't do. We still try to do that, we just definitely don't do it like we did to start. So our first customer is not some GE or something. This is probably a family in Georgetown.
Yeah. So in starting Aceable and then today, how has your thought process developed?
It's a lot of similar. It's really similar to the other answer. Well, now I think the most important thing now, and it's thank God, when we launched almost to the day 2 years ago. I did support. I did customer support. I did product design. I did everything other than write content because Josh wrote content with some other people. You just go from wearing every single hat to there's a time when you don't know what hat you actually wear. So I think that starts to shift, but thank God that now we have amazing people that are really good at what they do, because I shouldn't be doing any of that. So then with that shift, like your purpose has to change. Like, what is the value you're actually bringing to this company now? So that part has changed a lot.
What inspired you to start the company? Obviously, you've carved out a really good niche for yourself.
Just like being able to say you did it. I mean, quite honestly, there wasn't, someone asked, I was interviewing someone earlier and she asked me the same question. It's like, there's not this dramatic story that, you know, my uncle was in a car accident and I was like, I'm gonna make this safer. Like, I wish there kind of, well, I wish my uncle wasn't in a car accident. But I wish there was some like natural story, but there really wasn't. We found an opportunity because I listened to that, the investor at the end of the other story that said, you should stop doing this, said, the end of that meeting said, you should stop doing this, but you're doing a lot of things correct. Mobile makes sense, education makes sense, game and social mechanics makes sense, small pieces of content on mobile makes sense. Can you do it for stuff people have to learn? He gave me that feedback, and I vaguely remember hearing it at the time because I was $50,000 in debt, had $2,000 in cash, felt like I got punched in the stomach. 2 days later, I remembered he said that, and that's when it was like, all right, let's go think about that. And then we kind of backed into driver's ed, because the question was, well, if we're gonna go offer educational experience on mobile that people have to learn, who's the best customer? And at that point, and I still believe it would be teenagers. I don't wanna try to sell to K through 12. So I was like, well, what do consumer teenagers need that's educational? So test prep comes to mind, and then driver's ed. Test prep is super crowded, price points are super low. Efficacy, unfortunately, efficacy for SAT prep matters way more than driver's ed, which is kind of fucked up, but it's true. So driver's ed, and then I started looking at the market and looking at the products that were out there and looking at price points, and you're like, I think we can create a business here. And while it wasn't my passion, driver's ed wasn't my passion, I think it's pretty awesome that by doing it well, we are actually changing the way people drive, which is somewhat selfish because I have to drive on the same roads.
Do you have any competitors that have popped up in the space?
So there were existing competitors. There's companies that have been doing this online for 15 years. And we actually owed them a good amount of credit because they had to fight a lot of legislation to be able to bring this thing online to start. So, you know, thanks guys. But then we have just tried to innovate on top of that and just look at the holistic customer experience and see how can we make it better. So there's we start to see some of them are trying to catch up, some of them can't catch up, so.
So you kind of looked for a co-founder, that didn't kind of happen, and then you started just building a team? You're like, I'm not a coder, I need developers, is that how that happened?
So I found the engineer that built, I'll just call it the trivia platform. He ended up contracting throughout the time. We started on the driver's ed track. I needed two things. I need someone to design an app on top of, you know, what he could design or develop. And then, I mean, the biggest thing, you're gonna go sell a driver's ed course, you need a course. So we had to figure out, well, how do we do that? So Cece asked me earlier, like, well, did you hire an instructional designer? Like, I couldn't afford an instructional designer. So I hired a really, really witty writer from UT who would, she worked for the police dispatch station. And then when she joined us, she had to leave at 6 o'clock every night because she had to go clean office buildings. But she's like the wittiest human you've ever met, especially when she writes. So I paired her with a guy that was an amazing writer and also a teacher. So the two of them together, I figured, I mean, you're not inventing driver's ed from scratch, right? Like, this is tried and true material. Go make it entertaining and keep people engaged and make them smile. So we needed that part, and then we needed imagery to support that. We needed animation, so just found people to put it all together and convinced them not to work for a lot of money.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, so did you bootstrap that piece, and at what point did you raise money?
I did not bootstrap, well, I kind of bootstrapped, I guess, the first year, because I cashed in a 401k, I spent every dollar of savings and credit card debt that I had. But at that point, so that investor gave like the hard blah, 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 you should stop doing this, pivot the business, figure it all out, put together a pitch. I was in Capital Factory at that point, so extremely, extremely, extremely helpful. So I was meeting with mentors and potential investors every day, and I mean, as I started to understand the fundamentals of like what a business looks like, and I could start to articulate it in a much better way, people suddenly switched from being like, oh, this is cute, to like, can I invest? And I was like, holy shit, did you really just ask me? Yes. So that transition happened before I could hire really anyone to go build all this. And then we did it in parallel. It was like raise a little bit of money, spend it on people to help build it, and just keep doing that.
So what point did you apply for the accelerator program, and what was that process like?
So it was different then. I mean, it was probably 3 years ago. And it was back, they used to call, there was an incubator program, and then you'd like graduate to the accelerator program. So it was a little bit different, semantics that aren't really important anymore. For me, because there's like long stories in here, but I'll try not to tell them all. Being non-technical and not having like that I mean, I was literally selling these trivia games for dads. We made $5 on a really good day. So it wasn't like, wow, look at this traction, we should let them in. Our install numbers were good. I learned what vanity metrics were. Like every day, 150 people from around the world would install this thing, and I wouldn't pay any money for them to do that. Like that part was cool. So when I applied, I treated it like, sort of like I was campaigning. I found I would directly so Capital Factory has a page that has all the mentors on it. It used to have a lot less than it does now. It probably had 30 on it. I went on LinkedIn and found all of their email addresses, sent them all personal emails, like telling them about the business, almost like asking them to vote for me to get into the incubator program. You had to make a video, which I think I spent many days making, many days editing too. And it was about a business that doesn't really even exist today. So it was like politicking, I would say, for me, because I didn't have, like, that's all I could do. Like, that's the only part of the process I could control, is like how hard I would work to meet people and network with people and hopefully instill enough confidence for them. And they used to actually have a vote in that room down on the corner. Like, they'd sit around a table, people would dial in, and they'd have to like vote to let companies in. And I think it was quarterly.
Not monthly like it is now.
Yeah, it wasn't rolling monthly. I mean, they were letting like 1 to 3 companies in a quarter. So it was a different experience.
So you got into at that time it was the incubator program. And then at some point, did that roll over, or did you automatically get into the accelerator program?
At that point, you had to convince 2 partners of Capital Factory to invest $25,000 in your business.
Okay, so now like it is with the accelerator, that was the incubator which made you the
That was the signal or whatever, the tipping point to when you became part of the accelerator program.
So you convinced 2.
So I convinced 1 based on the trivia platform, which his words are like basically were like, I don't think this is your business, but the idea of small pieces of content in a gamified fashion on mobile, like something could be there. But he didn't give me any money, and he said, go get 1 other person that believes it, and then I'll write you your check. So that sucked.
So were you able to do that?
After the pivot, I was able to do that.
So you pivoted to the driver's ed, and then you just, with the list they gave you once you're in the program, then you just started like calling all of them?
There's one guy I wanted who was specific. His name's Eric Bear. He is it's like one of the best UX people in Austin, and knowing that we're trying to build a consumer product, it's like that's the guy that we need. So I was able to convince him, and then we actually got a third, which was that for like kind of what I was referencing when we got a third almost on accident. I met with the guy, he's like, oh, this is cool, can I be your third? I'm like, sure.
Sure.
So yeah.
And then you realized that you had some money, and then you figured out you had a business.
Not quite.
Okay, so kind of, can you walk through that transition?
Well, yeah, so, I mean, that was October 2013, when we got that money. Probably November is when we really started building the thing. And then I remember being pretty much right here, doing some pitch event. It was January 21st, 2014, was the day we submitted our course to the state of Texas. At that point, it was the DPS. So that was probably the scariest part of the whole business. So to be able to just offer driver's ed that's state approved, you have to get state approved. And you have no idea how long that takes, especially when none of us knew anything about the driver's ed business. So we, every day, I mean, it was literally like we're paying, I don't know, we had 5 people maybe. So we're paying salaries and paying people from each day, not knowing when we were ever gonna make $1. So 3 months later, so May 2014 is when we launched. But the first 2 months out of the 3 were the most nerve-wracking in my life because the woman didn't start reviewing it. We're just sitting there, literally like burning money, not knowing if we'll ever actually have a business. So then so by May she began, or April 1st, I remember getting a call like, hey, I'm gonna actually start reviewing. Thank God. But then I don't know how long it's gonna take her to do it either, so it's like, so she ends up doing it about a month. We get the go ahead to launch, and I don't know if everyone, all 13 of you guys, I mean, has anyone ever launched a product? Like every time I've ever, like all 13 of the really stupid mobile apps I've talked about, every freaking, I'm gonna say fucking, every fucking time you go to bed and you're like, this is it. Like by tomorrow night when I go to bed, my life will be just changed. Like it will just be, oh man, this is gonna be amazing. It's never ever happened. So we launched, and I don't think we had a sale on our first day. You know, my spreadsheet somewhere said we were gonna have like 30. And then so for May of that year, and it's funny how relative this whole thing is. May of that year we made $5,000, which was more money than I ever made in a month selling trivia games, for damn sure. Not enough money to keep paying for 5 people to show up to work every day. So May was really scary. June, I think we made $16,000, which is, yeah, right? We're growing 200%, a little over 200% growth, awesome.
Yeah.
Still not enough to keep paying people. And I remember, like, you guys don't know this, I went for a walk with a mentor, and I'm gonna say this, Josh, this stays here. I had to make a list of like, well, if we have to downsize, like who has to go? And like, I had to like do that exercise, which sucks. But thankfully July rolled around and we ended up doing like 28K. And I mean, we still spent probably 28K in customer acquisition cost, which also didn't fit my little spreadsheet. But it was like, oh, okay, maybe we have a business now. So I didn't really feel like we had a business until late July. August was the first time. August went well. And then this is what life does to you. We don't know anything about the driver's ed business. We're like, cool, we got 5, 16, 25. I think August we were on pace for like 32. September rolls around. We're like, oh, this is gonna be great. All the kids are gonna go back to school, and they're all gonna talk about our product. It's gonna be so incestuous, this like cesspool of kids talking about Aceable. We'll probably do $50,000 in revenue in September. Kids go to school and the last fucking thing on their mind is driver's ed. We went down to like $20,000 in revenue. And we were almost out of money, but thankfully, based on August, we were able to raise some more.
So that's when you raised another round.
We used convertible debt for a long, long time and just kind of kept rolling notes is what, just kept, oh, let's open up another note and see who will give us money. So we kept doing that.
And did you leverage those Capital Factory mentors, investors for that?
Yeah, I mean, Josh Bear would have to say, I'm pretty confident we've raised money from individually, more partners and mentors at Capital Factory. Because I would just sit in the kitchen and like, if you were sitting there, I would go talk to you and try to get money from you. I mean, and it's funny because you're like, I can only do 5,000. If you can do 5,000, cool. Like, here, write it, we'll sign it, let's go. So I think there's like something like 35 Capital Factory related investors that have invested in Aceable. And yeah, I mean, I promise I don't get paid to say this, but this place was absolutely pivotal. So I mean, okay, we come off that August. We raised a little bit more money. We raised enough that you always think you've raised enough too. Like, that's the other thing. You're like, oh, we're fine. We might never have to raise money again. You will. So we got to, it was probably September, it was late September, or mid-September, because mid-September was way better than late September. And there was a guy that was having office hours here at Capital Factory, and just because we worked here, I would always look at the office hour schedule and saw this guy, and he had like a real estate background. I was like, oh, so he'll understand this idea of like required education. I should just go take his next slot, which starts in 5 minutes. So I go sit down with him, and really awesome guy, keep talking, and he's like, well, I'm interested in investing. I was like, all right, that's amazing. And at this point, like, you know, he'd probably be our 35th investor. Like, that wasn't a new thing, thankfully. But then I get on the phone, and he's like, all right, well, let's talk next week. So we get on the phone, and he's like, all right, walk me through the whole business, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, all right, I'm interested. I'm like, all right, cool. Like, how much do you want to do? And every single investor at that point, the biggest check we had received at that point was $25,000. And he's like, I'm just trying to decide between $400,000 and $500,000. I'm like, holy shit.
But you didn't say that.
I might have said that. I might have said that, because that didn't happen. And it was all, I mean, he ended up investing. And it was all because we worked here. He had office hours in the kitchen. It's not like, I didn't even know he was an angel investor. I guess I didn't know he was like a godsend angel investor. Right. Exactly. But that's why this place is awesome, because that just happens. Like, if I was working at Starbucks, I'd probably been like, oh, Capital Factory's 15 minutes away. I'm not going to walk there for some guy that was a realtor in 1987. But it worked out.
All right, so I'm gonna ask a question that I didn't tell you about that's not kind of on the list, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to. But so with having so many investors, like, how much equity do you have to give up to each of them?
Well, I mean, it's a very relative answer, right? I can't go through all 56 right now.
Well, I mean, if you give 1% to each, that's like 56% of your company. Like, what's that balance, right? And so how would an entrepreneur figure that out?
So I'm trying to, so I only have, you know, like, I have one experience to talk about, right? Like, I haven't done this twice. I haven't actually done it even once. We're on our way to doing it one time. So I will just say my perspective. I think people worry about equity way too much. I think founders worry about equity way too much. And I'm sure there's plenty founders that have way more experience than I that would be like, you're an idiot. Which is fine, because I probably am. But I think people worry about that way too much and don't worry about what you're actually getting for that equity. Like, more companies run out of cash. I mean, look, there's like the odds, like 99% of startups fail. The only way you fail is you run out of money. I mean, or I guess you decide to give money back when you just don't have that much, but I don't know many people that do that. I guess there's been a few startups that like dissolve with some cash and they give it back, but even to get to that point means you've done incredible things. So like if the only way you're gonna fail is run out of money, and the one thing that you can mitigate is like getting money, do it. I mean, negotiate good terms, like work hard to do that part, but at the end of the day, you need to be smart about it, but I think people get way too wrapped up about equity. Like the number of people that I've had conversations with about joining Capital Factory because they don't want to give up 2% of their company, I'm like trying to bite my tongue. I should actually be able to bite my tongue. But I think it's just super narrow-minded, because you will run out. If you're really gonna grow as fast as you need to grow to be able to be the business that investors expect, you need cash. So I'm not saying just like give it away, you know, in a ridiculous fashion, but I think people get way too wrapped up around that and not wrapped up enough of like, this is what I'm gonna do to make this business succeed. So. I don't
So
know if
it's
that-
not really like how much equity you retain as much as the equity giving away the value you're getting for that, and the traction you're getting and the growth that you're getting.
Yeah, I mean, there's like picture perfect ways to do the whole thing, right? Like you raise money at a $10 million valuation, you almost spend it all, but you prove enough product market fit and enough traction that you can now go raise it at 50 million, then you go raise more, and then you use all of that, and then you go raise it again. It just never works out like that. So I just think there's so many more important things to get wrapped up than over like a point here and a point there, that you should just be more focused on like what can you be doing to get back to work and go actually win in a market.
Got it. Okay, thanks for that. So how did, in that,
That's what I think.
yeah, no, thank you. And that growth that you were talking about, how did you get all those users? Was it social media, word of mouth, both?
Early on, it was all, so we were an iOS app to start, so it was all, our only paid acquisition channel was Facebook ads. Mobile app install, Facebook ads.
And did you write those ads yourself, or did you hire somebody to do that?
Several of us wrote them, but yeah.
Yeah,
We
we
did.
did them internally, you didn't hire an
Yeah.
agency or something like that?
Not very early on. We later hired an agency. A year and a half later? A year later. Yeah, a year later we hired an agency.
Okay.
We don't have them anymore, but no, early on we did everything.
Yeah.
It was really fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Okay. So fast forward to today, like how many users do you have right now?
How many, like active total? We'll just say total, about 200,000 total people have used our driver's ed app and defensive driving app.
That's awesome. And how large is your team currently?
We just hired 2 people that start next week or 2 weeks from now. So we're at 37 now.
What's the one factor that's been most influential in helping you build Aceable?
Did you send me that question too?
I did. It's on the list.
The one factor. What, Nicole?
Is it grit?
Yeah, it is. I mean, so we talk about grit a lot at Aceable. But it's true. The other way, someone, I think Paul Graham, someone told me, I read a blog by Paul Graham, and I think he talks about, I was thinking about it earlier, being relentlessly resourceful, which I think ties to grit a lot. But I think you have to have that mentality, and probably more relentless than, well, the relentless part. Like, you can't give up, but you also have to be very coachable and listen. Otherwise, I would have driven a mobile charades game into the ground.
Yeah, so that's an interesting balance, right? Because those two could be in conflict at any point.
Listen, which two?
So like they're relentless, and then,
Well, I think you just have to be unafraid to just go find the like to email every single Capital Factory partner. Or like, we did a demo day here in October 2013. It was like, it was before we really raised money. There's 125 investors in this room. Capital Factory wouldn't give us the names or email, well, they wouldn't give us the email addresses for the investors that attended. So, from, our desks used to be back on that side of the building. So from 10 o'clock at night to 3 a.m., I took the Eventbrite list that had the name and the company of every investor. And I went on LinkedIn and sent all 125 a personalized message saying, thanks for attending, really hope you liked our pitch, if you'd like to get coffee, blah, blah, blah. Here's something about LinkedIn, I don't know if it still exists, but, so it was like 2 a.m. and I'd sent 100 messages, and at 101, they make you enter a CAPTCHA.
yes.
So for the last 25, I'm so freaking tired, like I hurt, and I'm just like entering, mistyping CAPTCHAs to send messages to the last 25 investors. So from that 125, 2 responded, really good rate. One I went to lunch with, he ended up telling me he's not an investor. So cool. He did buy lunch, so we'll take it. And then the other guy, him and his buddies ended up investing the first real outside $150,000. So,
Wow.
like that to me is being relentlessly resourceful.
Sure. What advice can you give to other entrepreneurs? Like,
Be relentlessly resourceful.
like there's somebody in the room who has an idea, or somebody in the room who maybe they have a little bit of traction and they're looking to raise money.
I mean, it really depends on the situation. But I would say, just using the first one, the idea one, before I did any of this, I never came to things like this, and I wasn't involved in a crowd that thought this way, so like, you guys all might roll your eyes at this. But the idea, just how cheap ideas are. That, like, the people that are like, I have this great idea, but you have to sign an NDA. Like, that was me. That was definitely me. I was like scared to tell people about my mobile charades game because like, you're gonna steal it. You're gonna become the billionaire. Like, I truly believed that. So, all I learned though was that ideas don't mean shit. Your ability to work extremely, 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 extremely hard and work harder than other people are willing to work. Like, that's all that matters. Talking about it will get you absolutely nowhere. Like, doing it will probably get you to failure, which is where you need to get so you can come up with the idea that's actually good. Or you just need to fail 7 times. So, do a hell of a lot more, talk a hell of a lot less.
So then you get to that failure and then you pivot from there, and that could be like the right idea or where you need to be.
It could or it could not be.
Or you pivot again and you figure it out eventually.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, yes. Maybe it's a pivot, maybe it's just a whole new business, but yes.
Sure. What advice could you give to somebody looking to raise money?
I won't use all the answers I just gave. Just be very clear. I mean, there's so many good examples out there on like pitch decks. I know Kip from Silverton has one on his blog that is like, it's a PowerPoint file you can download, and it's like a made up business, and it's like all of the slides that, I mean, granted, it's like if you were gonna pitch him what he would want, but I think if you can get your business to that point where you've thought through all of those pieces, and be able to understand it and really, really communicate it well. It seems really straightforward, but a lot of people can't do that. I mean, that's a good place. There's lots of other, like, should you raise outside money? That's another question. Like, what kind of business do you want? I mean, there's lots of questions you could ask, but I would say being able to crisply articulate what your business does today and what it will do in the future, and frankly, how it's gonna make an investor a shitload of money, like, that's what matters.
They want to see that, right? What the return is.
Yeah, it's not, unless you're a nonprofit,
Sure.
it's not charity, so, especially depending who they are. If they're a professional investor, then 100%. If they're just a really nice angel investor that just feel like wasting money, that's cool too. So,
So if you had to do it all over again, would you have done anything differently?
I mean, I guess the answer has to be no, because I think we're at a pretty cool spot. So who knows what, this is like more philosophical than startup. The answer you're not looking for is, I would say no. Are there lots of things I could have done differently? Of course. Tons and tons and tons and tons and tons. Is that a cop-out answer?
Okay, we'll take it. You've given us a lot of good info, thanks. All right, so I want to open it up to the audience for questions. Who has questions for Blake?
Uh-oh. What's up, Cece?
Anybody else go first, though? I have lots of them. I told him, I hit him when he first came in. He's like, whoa, Kim didn't share any of these questions with me. Scalability. Can you kind of talk about that? What's your vision? What are you thinking? How are you gonna make that happen? Have you even looked at that yet?
Yeah, so for our business, it's, you know, the immediate scalability and then the future beyond that, right? So with the driving vertical, we do driver's ed, defensive driving. We have to go state by state, so we expand that way. Obviously, within each one of those markets, we need to, you know, double, triple, quadruple market penetration. So that's the immediate goal. The longer term goal is driver's ed is just one type of licensure education. I read it actually again this morning, 29% of all jobs in America require some sort of license. A lot of those have either pre-licensure education or continuing education as a requirement. So 5 years from now, we want to be the place that you go for all that type of education.
So you told me earlier that it took 90 days to build your first course, approximately, roughly.
If Josh says yes, then I say yes.
Roughly, yes.
Yes. Uh-huh.
That was probably working 24/7.
It was working a lot.
And you've gotten that down to,
Depending on the requirements for the state, and I mean, it comes down to like how much is the content that we've created, like the content that we need in a new market. Like if it was a brand new vertical, it's gonna take potentially 3 months again, depending how much content you need. Driver's ed's really long in the fact it's 32 hours. So if it's a 4-hour course of some sort, probably do it in a couple weeks, depending what it is.
okay, I'm gonna ask a couple of other technical questions. Sorry, audience. You're having to report to the state on people completing their course, right? Each of the states.
Depends on the state, depends on the course, depends on the state.
Okay. So do you have a tracking and reporting tool that you built or that you bought off the shelf?
We have, well, I guess that's not true. We built it.
I'm trying not to ask you.
He built it and he uses it every day.
Okay. Because if you're gonna scale to different industries, they all want their own reporting, blah, blah, blah. So that's why I'm asking if it's internal or off the shelf.
It is internal for now.
Okay.
Ben can build anything. She said he can.
Given enough time and money, you can build it.
Is that back end, front end, or both?
Back, API, and front end.
You want me?
No, not
Oh,
those tools.
we got lots of stuff.
So are most of your developers full stack?
No. She asked if most of our developers are full stack.
Most of our developers can be full stack anytime that they choose to be. but we specialize so that our time is used most efficiently.
You should sit here. Yeah, Jake.
So you talk about, taking a walk with your mentor and one of them telling you you should quit this and start this, and
Uh-huh.
you did, and then it's turned into Aceable. What's the best piece of advice that you didn't take? You're like, oh damn. After the fact, you're like, he knew what he was talking about. But
Yes, that's a really good question. I'm probably gonna fall asleep thinking about it.
Thanks for ruining my week.
No, so I think just as human nature goes, I think you forget about all of that. I'm sure there was lots though. Can I come back to it?
Absolutely.
I don't know. That's a really, really good question. Yeah, I have to think about it more. I
chew
mean,
on it for a bit.
I know there's a lot. Any other questions? You guys can ask questions, sure. Yeah.
Has there been a point yet when you've gone to sleep at night saying my company's secure?
I don't know.
Secure?
You. Like safe, like I can go to sleep without worrying about my business. If there was that point, when was it?
No. Is that camera on? It is?
Yes, yeah.
All right, well then
It's
I
like
won't.
live stream.
True?
Their
Yeah.
YouTube channel, yeah.
All right.
Seth's watching it.
Hi, Seth. Yeah, I'll answer that offline.
So different way to ask that question, which I usually ask and I didn't, is what keeps you up at night?
Depends on the night. Again, the camera's on. I mean, I guess, and they all know it too, so we have really aggressive growth goals. Like, you take venture capitalist money and they expect lots of growth because they have investors, those investors have investors, so we have really, really big growth goals that month over month they're stretch. And there's so much. I think the hardest part about the whole thing, and I feel like this is more so in a consumer business like ours, and not necessarily, well, I think it's just a more consumer business piece, is there's so much we don't control. Like, we don't necessarily control a price point in a market. Like, when we have a product that almost has zero marginal cost. Like, someone that I hope's not watching, a sole proprietor could have a driver's ed course that they put on like some open source LMS system. They could decide to sell our $100 product for $10. Now, is it a great product? No. I'm assuming no. Is it a good experience? No, but it's still $10. Like, what does that do to an overall market? Does it bring a price point down to $50? Well, if it does, our total addressable market in that is now obviously half of what it was. So, just things outside of our control, because we can never control them, because they're outside of our control. Sorry to be redundant.
That's all.
And I'm sure someone that runs a B2B business would be like, well, there's plenty of things outside of our control.
Yeah,
So,
I can tell you.
right.
Lots of things.
I feel like having a sales pipeline is kind of a little bit more predictable. Yeah, Joe.
How do you balance your personal life with the demands of running a startup?
I don't know.
Do you have a personal life?
I think so.
Okay, good.
You can ask them.
He blends.
I think, so I probably work a lot. I know I work a lot. But to me, this is what I tell friends at least. Like, we get to play the most fun game there is. Like, you can play board games, like, they're fun, but, like, we play board games with real people's millions of dollars that pay for 37 people to go home at night and be with their families, and there will be a winner, there'll be a second place, and there won't be much else. Like, to me, that's really fun, as long as you're winning.
Or at least in second place.
Second place still sucks, but, so, it's not really like a job. Working at Ernst & Young, that's a job. This is really fun. So then there's not, like, I don't know, like, how much time do you have for games? Like, I take my game time and I just bring it into work time too. That doesn't really answer your question at all, but I mean, realistically, let me really answer your question. I think it's extremely important to get away. Like last week, thank God we have an amazing team. I went home to California for a week and barely worked. And like, I just really personally needed that. And then I come back this week and my energy level's way higher, my creativity's way higher, I'm far more engaged in what we're doing. So like, you know, the CEOs that talk about like, oh, I work 80 hours a week and I do that for 5 years, like, God bless them, like that's impressive. I couldn't do that. I do think you have to get away because I think you come back a hell of a lot stronger. I do, I can only talk for myself. So I do think it's important, especially creative outlets. They help you reframe problems that you might not be seeing in your like direct business through other means. So I think it's awesome. Callie, is that it? Kaylee.
There's one vote. Do you think Aceable will branch out into other education certification programs?
That is the plan.
What do you think is the next one?
I cannot talk about it.
The camera's off.
That's a good question.
That's why
You gotta get the camera to sign an NDA.
Okay, now I'm just contradicting what I said about ideas, huh? But I guess, yeah. Addie.
What is your dynamic like with the investors and how much autonomy do you have?
That's a good question. I think the most important thing that I learned with investors, it all kind of falls under this, like, I'm not that good at anything, so if you're not gonna be that good at anything, just do the easy things well and consistently. So like, transparency, every month I send an investor update. I've done it for the last probably 19 months. And by doing that, they know when I need them, they know when I don't need them. It's not like I'm like suddenly calling up out of the blue 6 months later saying, oh, hey, we need more money, because they're in the loop. I think and they all really, really appreciate it, because I hear them tell other startups to start sending investor updates like we do. So I think that helps create trust, because there's accountability and I'm being credible and I don't use adjectives really in those investor updates. It's like, here's the facts. So that's been really helpful. But I guess the far more helpful thing, since we took on professional investment, we beat forecast every month. So that's also how you make investors grant you autonomy. Just do better than you said you were gonna do. That's probably the more important one, but the former was helpful before.
Thank you.
Yeah,
So you said that
maybe I can answer
no one
this
had
question
any,
for you.
no one had any experience with defensive driving and education markets, things like that. What's been some like hard lessons learned about your audience along the way? You mentioned,
Yeah.
you know, you thought they were gonna go back to school and talk about it, and they didn't.
Yeah, seasonality was a huge lesson, but I already talked about that one. I don't think we gave enough credit from a driver's ed perspective, to parents early on, and their involvement in the process. I think our brand was pretty heavy towards kids. I think it still is kind of too, it's freaking cameras. not that anyone's gonna watch this,
Except Seth.
especially 55 minutes in or whatever we are. I think we learned a lot there. Launching defensive driving, that was one where I was like, again, went to sleep thinking like this was the holy grail. No, that's been way, way harder than we thought it would be. Margins are tight across the board. Customer acquisition channels are different. Every new market we go into, there's some nuance about it that was unforeseen. I think a lot of like starting a company is you're just like kind of waiting for that day when it's gonna be easy. But it's not ever. Like just waiting for like, oh, and then you know what, like hopefully somewhere we'll just do that one thing that, well actually it happened like 3 weeks ago. We changed one word on a landing page. So we run a lot of PPC ads, AdWords, like through Google, the top of the search results. We changed one word that was just like, oh, we should probably change it to this. Okay, run a test with it. It changed our conversion rate by like 15% or something. It's like, it was like, holy shit, we finally got something easy. Like after, I don't know, 10,000 tries of stuff. So every once in a while that happens, but.
So now just like changing one words all across the site.
Yeah. Tomorrow, that's our new strategy. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, Patty.
How do you determine priorities?
That's a really good question. Honestly, I think that's something that team-wise I haven't done a very good job of. Zoom myself review, guys. Making crystal clear across an organization, because now we now have an organization, right? Like 2 years ago we had 5 people. 6 months before that it was just me. So communicating in a clear way what our priorities are. We now have like 3 distinct bullet points. Like these are pretty much the guiding North Stars of all decisions we're making. But it took me a while to understand like that was missing from a leadership perspective. So then, I mean, those 3 priorities, they all align with, well, what is our business objective, right? So, which you hear and you're like, well, that's so obvious. But I promise 6 months ago, I didn't think it was that obvious. Well, maybe I thought they were obvious, but that doesn't really work anymore too. You have to communicate them clearly and over and over and over and over again.
And act on them. You can't just communicate.
Yeah.
Actually make sure they're the real value.
Well, priorities, but yeah. Thankfully, much smarter people than I do act on them. I just get to choose them.
Okay.
Is the team working here at Startup Grind?
Is the team working here at Startup
I
Grind?
mean, are they all housed here, I guess?
Oh, we're not anymore. We were a little over a year ago. We moved out. What do we have? 12 people? No,
That sounds
8 or 9 people when we moved out.
Yeah, we have 9 people around in a circle.
Yeah, we had about 100 square feet for 9 people. Like, maybe 120 square feet. But I think this is the thing though, the whole priority issue I was just talking about, when we had 9 people and 120 square feet, like, I don't think there was much question what our priority was. We now have 37 people and 6,000 square feet, and communication changes a lot. We just redid our office a month ago-ish, maybe 2 weeks ago. And I've already noticed a huge difference in communication and the way people work together in not a great way. So I can only imagine when you have different offices in different cities like that. I mean, you just have to be way more intentional about it. That wasn't even your question, but there you go.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for being here with us tonight. Let's give Blake
Thank you all very much.
round of applause.
Anyone else wants to sit in front of a room and talk about themselves? You're welcome to.